All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling a really big foundational question about government. You know, the people who run our public institutions. What's really driving them? Is it this idea of selfless service, or is it just plain old self interest? We've got two powerful theories that give completely different answers. And, getting a handle on them is absolutely key to figuring out how our governments actually work, or why sometimes they don't.
So let's start with this pretty raw assessment from the management guru Peter Drucker. I mean, wow. This quote really captures a deep-seated cynicism about public bureaucracy. It's the perfect way to kick things off because it sets the stage for a theory that sees government not as some noble calling, but more like a marketplace full of competing, selfish interests. And that theory is called the public choice approach. What it does is actually pretty simple, but also kind of radical. It takes the rules of economics and applies them directly to politics. It just assumes that politicians and bureaucrats are rational actors, just like you or me when we're shopping. And what do rational actors do? Well, they look out for number one. From this point of view, a public official isn't really thinking about the public good first and foremost. They're busy trying to maximize their department's budget, grow their own power, and make sure their career is secure.
Now, to see what this looks like in the real world, we can turn to the public administration scholar Fred Riggs. He came up with something called the Sala model to describe what he was seeing in some developing societies. And it's just a perfect picture of the public choice perspective in action. You've got these modern, formal rules written down on paper, but in reality, decisions are being driven by nepotism, loyalty to your own community, and these informal cliques, he called them cliques, that use their government jobs for their own benefit. It's self-interest completely steamrolling public duty. It's a pretty cynical view, isn't it? I mean, it paints this picture of government as fundamentally broken, just totally self-serving. But is that really the whole story? Are we all just cogs in this big machine of self-interest? Or is there something more to the idea of public service?
So let's pivot here. Let's really dig into the powerful counterargument. This long-standing ideal of public service as something more, as a higher calling. A duty not to yourself, but to everyone.
You know, this ideal of selfless service, it isn't some new age invention. It has incredibly deep roots in history. Way back in ancient India, Kautilya wrote that a ruler's happiness is tied to his subjects' happiness. Fast forward a couple thousand years, and you have Max Weber, the father of sociology, envisioning this ideal bureaucracy as a rational system, a system built on merit specifically to fight against corruption and personal whims. And today, this idea of good governance that you hear about from places like the World Bank, it's all about using public power for a country's development, not for personal gain.
Okay, so we've got these two clashing philosophies. Public choice on one side, public service on the other. But what does the science of human behavior tell us about what actually gets people out of bed in the morning? Are we really just hardwired for selfishness?
This whole conflict is perfectly captured in Douglas McGregor's famous Theory X and Theory Y. Theory X is the cynical view. People are basically lazy, they hate work, and you have to control them with carrots and sticks. Sound familiar? It's pretty much the core assumption of the public choice approach. But then there's Theory Y, which offers this radically different vision, that work can be as natural as play, that people want to be motivated, they seek out responsibility, and they find deep fulfillment in work they believe in. That lines up perfectly with the ideal of public service. And this idea builds on another classic you've probably seen before, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The public choice model, it really only operates on the bottom levels of this pyramid. Our need for safety and security, the things a paycheck can buy. But what Maslow showed is that once those basic needs are met, we're driven by much higher order needs. The need for belonging, for esteem, and at the very top, for self-actualization. That deep desire to live a life of purpose. A career in public service can speak directly to those more powerful, higher-level motivations. And look, this isn't just a theory. The famous Hawthorne experiments back in the 20s and 30s found something pretty revolutionary. Researchers went in thinking they could boost productivity by changing the lighting or other physical conditions. But what they discovered was that productivity went up when the social environment changed. Workers did better when they felt valued, when they were part of a team, and when they felt like management actually cared about them. This completely blew up what they called the rabble hypothesis, that core public choice idea that we're all just a bunch of isolated individuals only driven by self-interest. Okay, so we're left with these two completely opposed views of the world, selfish actors versus selfless servants. So which one is right? Well, maybe the most useful answer is that that's the wrong question. The real key here is to understand that each theory is good for a different purpose.
This is where the public choice approach is incredibly valuable. Think of it as a powerful diagnostic tool. It gives us a clear, unsentimental way to understand why and how government can fail. Why does corruption happen? Well, public choice gives us a formula. It's monopoly power plus high discretion minus accountability. Why do agencies get bloated and inefficient? Because their real incentive is to maximize their budget, not their results. Public choice is absolutely brilliant at explaining the disease.
But a diagnosis is not a cure, right? So if public choice theory is great at identifying the problems, the ideal of public service, backed up by all this behavioral science, gives us the prescription. It shows us how to design systems that encourage our better angels to come out and play.
And that prescription is a whole set of concrete tools, all designed to counter the very risks that public choice theory points out. We create formal checks on power through things like legislative and judicial oversight. But just as importantly, we empower citizens directly through things like citizen charters, social audits, and transparency laws like the Right to Information Act. It's really all about building a system of accountability from both the top down and the bottom up.
So, at the end of the day, this is the key takeaway. Public choice theory doesn't have to undermine public service ethics. Actually, it's essential for it. It helps us be realistic and clear-eyed about the potential for things to go wrong. We use it as a diagnostic tool to see where the system is vulnerable to self-interest. But we don't build our government based on its cynical assumptions. We build it on a leadership philosophy of public service, creating institutions that promote accountability, transparency, and a real sense of mission.
And that leaves us with one last really critical question to chew on. There is a real tension here, isn't there? We need the cold, hard realism of public choice to guard against failure. But we also need the soaring idealism of public service to strive for something great. So if we design our entire government based only on the assumption that people are selfish, can we ever create a system that truly inspires them to be their best?